Welcome, those with gender and those without. My name is Rosemary Bagels, and I want to talk about Champions of the Just and narrative design. Quick breakdown. Champions of the Just is one of two branching quests in the main quest line of Dragon Age Inquisition. It's faction recruitment. You're choosing between mages and Templars. This quest is the latter. While the choice between these groups is played up to be narratively important, it is in fact mechanically irrelevant. So if you're the sort of dumbass who decides, yes, recruiting the fantasy cops is a good idea, here's what happens. You arrive at a castle and meet up with this guy, whom you've never seen before, will never see again, and could die, and then you talk to this guy, whom you've also never seen before, will never see again, and could die. This guy offers a minigame where you raise banners to display your political values or something, more on that later, but you can opt out of it and probably should because saying no means this guy doesn't get shot for some reason. Either way, you're then taken to talk to this dude who tries to kill you, and taking exception to that starts a prolonged combat sequence fighting through the castle to find the bad guy in charge, who is in fact a demon that looks like a demented baby that's stolen someone's face. The demon gets in your head, you wander inside your mind for a little bit until you meet the best boy, and then you, light torches to free yourself? Then there's a second combat segment where there's an area to defend, but you have to leave it to do stuff, and the entire time you're gone, a timer to destruction counts down, so you gotta periodically come back and fight some guys to reset the clock. After you've finished all that, you run up some stairs, punch the baby in the face, and then handle this binary choice that makes it seem like dismantling the entire structure of the fantasy cops is a bad thing. On a pure mechanics level, this is all fine. There's mystery, variations in combat, a trip to the Fade, a fucking time section, and, well, I'll admit to finding Inquisition's combat mind-numbingly dull. Discussing that is outside the scope of this video. On paper, it's all here. We've never seen an envy demon before, so this is new, exciting. There's a trip to the Fade, everyone loves that, and it allows for a really interesting introduction to one of your future companions. Unfortunately, Champions of the Just has the unique distinction of being literally the worst main quest in Inquisition. I said main quest, don't at me, and that entirely falls onto the narrative. The villain is boring, the characters are underutilized, the roleplay is skippable, all exposition happens in a closet, nothing that happens here will have observable rippling consequences, and the Fade scene is just lame. They made the Fade lame. It's a world as infinitely variable as dreams, and they built linear green prison rooms. I don't understand why you would... In no particular order, let's tackle some issues. Inquisition overall has a problem of letting you be really non-committal with your roleplay. While it sometimes asks your opinion, those statements are easy to back out of. The banners are one of the only times where the game actually asks you to make a declarative statement and stand by it, which it then completely undermines with this opt-out option. Also, besides companion approval, there are no mechanical ramifications to what you pick here. You could say the Templars are worth shit, and they'll come with you all the same. And I know some people will say companion approval is all that matters, but companion approval is literally the only metric we have. Imagine instead if later, when you were at the Winter Palace, some Orlesians got salty with you for ranking the people over the Chantry. Imagine if the ramifications of participating in game mechanics weren't a random NPC's death, but were rather movements of a subtle faction system. Even a bare-bones meter for noble approval, and a second one for commoners. Flavor some text and change a recruit outfit or two depending on favor, and now the actions you're taking actually have an effect on the game world. But now I'm just thinking about Dragon Age New Vegas, so let's move on. Everything we learn that barely ties into the main plot as is, we glean from a single room. And it's a good room, with the fucked up blood drawings of the Inquisition's flaming-eyed sword thing that really emphasize the eyes. And there's Cole, literally explaining the plot to you, and a few notes to fill in backstory, and absolutely no one is going to pay attention because it is in the middle of the time section. You aren't sitting there listening to Cole and wondering what the larger implications of what he's saying because you're thinking about that damn ticking clock. Did it stop ticking down when this cutscene started? Can you check? Will you be penalized mechanically for paying attention to the narrative? To answer, while the cutscene is going, the timer is frozen, but you can't linger in the atmosphere and are decentivized from exploration because tick, tick, tick. Bad place to put your plot critical exposition. This is more a gripe with the structure of Inquisition as a whole and how it telegraphs its choices, but I do want to bring it up. The decision of whether you go to the Mages or the Templars mechanically does not matter. What actually matters is this one dialogue decision here at the end. As far as the game is concerned, recruiting the Mages as free allies or forcibly dismantling and absorbing the Templar Order is exactly the same thing, which it isn't. It just fundamentally isn't. The choice you make here will never come up in a meaningful way ever again. The only consequences are some points towards choosing the next divine, and they fucking phrase it like disbanding the fantasy cops might somehow be a bad thing to do. But here's the big thing. The hook for this level, as you could call it, is the Envy Demon and the trip to the Fade. The Fade really should be the highlight. It's fascinating, and yet this segment is so boring. Like, nothing happens. It's a spectacle, I guess? But you don't learn anything. You gain no knowledge of the world or the people in it, which includes your character. You just look at relatively ineffective spooky stuff and then move on. It's impersonal. Why is that? Well, let's address what's not present, your companions. There are going to be some unavoidable comparisons to Fade segments in other Dragon Age games. Most relevant to us is the bit in the Mage Tower in Origins, where you and your companions fight a sloth demon, and also going into Vanriel's head in Dragon Age 2 to free him from a different sloth demon. These segments work for a myriad of reasons, cool shape-shifting powers being one of them, but both of them use the opportunity to push an exploration of character as well. In Origins, whoever you brought with you is stuck in their own dream segment, and finding them reveals something about their history. What was made to fool them, and how they react, offers deep insight into their characters. Like, Alistair wanting nothing more than a good relationship with his half-sister is really sad. And Morrigan once again proves badass because she isn't fooled and doesn't have time for this shit. The quest in Dragon Age 2 is structured differently, built around an exploration of Vanriel. Each section reveals more about him, his history, personal struggles, and the world he lives in. And if an exploration of minor character isn't interesting to you, the beings you encounter will tempt or even corrupt your companions. You see what it takes to get them to break, which is astonishingly little in most cases. Both of these quests have gut punches of character building in their foundations, so BioWare was definitely kneecapping themselves in terms of storytelling potential by having you go in alone, but that doesn't mean this Fade trip couldn't have been engaging, provided it was actually centered around something, interesting. So let's talk about potential options to center this section on. If Inquisition was a game more like Origins, in that it had a full, or in fact, any exploration of the player character's backstory, a level centered on exploring their headspace wouldn't be a bad idea. You would, after all, have at least a few NPC faces the player could recognize and at least potentially care about. The reason why that isn't done nowadays is mostly a question of budget. The more detailed character models become, the more expensive it is to make them. Same with maps and props and any other visual signifiers you might have. Even with the extremely narrow scope of Inquisition's backgrounds, including a single relevant NPC for this level would necessitate at bare minimum 4 or 5 different characters. One for each race, but maybe 2 for human, depending if they were a mage or not. And that absolutely is not cost effective. Plus, the Inquisitor is somewhat of a blank slate. The less established they are, the more people can write whatever they want into them, and while hinting at someone's siblings is easily ignorable, said siblings show up would be very jarring to anyone role-playing as an only child. From a business standpoint, there's an argument to be made that the less specific the protagonist, the better, and that's a discussion for a whole different video. But that means you can't dig into the Inquisitor's backstory or really build a level around them at all without sort of defining who they are. But Cole is here, right? Cole is bizarre and nuanced. You could totally build a level around exploring him as a character or picking up bits of his history. And, to be fair, Cole's introduction is the most interesting part of this segment, but we learn absolutely nothing about him here. What we learn about Cole as a person, rather than just of his existence as a spirit, comes from these lines he shouts at the boss.
Dark and desperate, death to make yourself alive. I used to be like you. I'm not anymore. You shouldn't be either.
That's a really important piece of characterization that people who play through the mage's side will never get to learn, but this is the only thing we get. There is an entire novel explaining Cole's history, and none of it is here. What would this Fade segment be like if some of Cole's memories were bleeding through? If you could hear his sister laughing in the background, kept finding children's toys, or rabbits, or bodies of people who starved to death in cages, even just subtle things that would hint to his history and would make sense in retrospect. Or if you read the novel. But no, that might actually be interesting. Instead, this Fade segment is built around exploring Envy, the character. And this pool is very shallow. Envy is a one-note campy villain, and they try to make it spooky rather than going ham, which could never have worked. It is literally the worst option, so why? Why is it like this? Because this quest is too fucking early. Your typical Dragon Age player who doesn't spend 40 hours wandering the hinterlands doing literally every side quest before pushing on is going to play through Champions of the Just maybe 8 to 15 hours in. You're still new to the mechanics, haven't found your actual base of operations, there's no way to know which companions you've recruited, and even if you've recruited all of them, you've probably only tried each of them out maybe once or twice. You've had, 2 full conversations with each advisor, and woe to anyone new to the franchise trying to learn the political landscape exclusively through context. My point is, you don't know these people. Maybe if I had some reason to care about Josephine, seeing the Envy Demon parade her form about like this would be disturbing. But at this point in the game, she's just a random lady who wants me to do things but will shout at me for actually exercising autonomy. Imagine if this moment happened later, when you had formed some personal bonds with your companions. Envy could take the form of your love interest. That'd be terrifying. Or, if you didn't want to tie it to companions, what about plot? Taunt the players about the loss of Haven, whether they recruited or exiled the Wardens. Inspire doubt in their decision of who they put on the Orlesian throne. Needle them with the various horrors that might come should any given person be made divine. Just something to tie into what actually matters in the structure of the game. But you can't do that because the Templar level needs a boss fight, even though Envy and the Templars have literally nothing to do with each other. And you can't have a Templar just be evil, then we wouldn't look at them sympathetically. And you can't have a Fade segment about the Templars because that might risk showing them for the abusive jailers and thugs they really are, so you play it safe and make a level that means nothing and says nothing. How would I fix it? Make the players rue wanting to recruit the Templars in the first place.